Hey, good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack here. Monday now, the 23rd of December, 2024. Good to be back with you. A couple weeks off. Took a vacation with my wife down to the Caribbean. Went to Grand Cayman. Saw a few friends and colleagues down there. Went over to Jamaica. First time I've ever been to Jamaica, and now I'm back. Got a lot to talk about with you. First, tropic stuff related to next year's hurricane season. Nothing too heavy. I realize we just got done with hurricane season, and an impactful one at that, but still a few things I want to show you. And then maybe a very favorable pattern coming up as we start 2025 that could yield some pretty good chances for cold and snow in the east along the I-95 corridor. We shall see, but some pretty good signs coming up of a much more favorable pattern. All right, that's what's on the agenda for today. Let's get started, shall we? First of all, first stop, SOI, the Southern Oscillation Index, a very good indicator of how the pressure pattern across the tropical Pacific is doing. And by and large, things are positive right now. The 30-day average at 13.10. That will probably end up beating November. We still got a few days left on the calendar, of course, for December. But by and large, both indices are generally up, the 30 and the 90-day. Positive, which means we are typically in a La Nina type pattern with strong easterly flow across the tropical Pacific. And another way to say it, no El Nino in sight. And we can see that pretty clearly here on the anomalies chart from 90 degrees longitude all the way past the date line. Pretty much cold anomalies at the surface and even in the subsurface now. And it won't be long that NOAA and the Climate Prediction Center will declare that we are officially in a weak La Nina, and this looks like it's going to hang around for the next several months. Meanwhile, Gulf of Mexico is still pretty warm relative to average, as is most of the Caribbean. This little region of the main development region, tropical Atlantic, has cooled off a little bit in recent months, but it's still slightly above average. And then the northeast Atlantic all the way up towards Greenland, Iceland, and vicinity, still running quite a bit warmer than the 30-year mean. And I don't see this changing anytime soon. The climate models don't see much of a change. Maybe the La Nina fades away towards summer to more cool neutral or weak La Nina, but no El Nino. That doesn't seem like it's going to be in the cards for 2025. And that brings me to the first extended range forecast from our friends over at TSR, Tropical Storm Risk out of the UK. And they're calling for 15 named storms. I'll just highlight it myself over here. 15 named storms, 7 of which would become hurricanes, 3 of those intense or major hurricanes, category 3 or higher. And an ACE prediction for 2025 of 129. And I like this, the 74, the 30, and the 10-year norms versus where the forecast is. So the 10-year norm has the ACE at about 142, running a little bit hotter than the 30-year by about 20 points, right? And 129, so slightly below the last 10-year climate norm, if you want to look at it that way. And the skill is very low at this lead time, as you could imagine, and they even talk about that. This outlook has large uncertainties. It's December, for goodness sakes, but the different parameters are pretty much what I just talked to you about. Caribbean and MDR temperature anomalies, which has a pretty good correlation to what the trade winds are going to be like. They are somewhat related. The state of the INSO, I just showed you that. And then this is interesting here, the analog years, the two best that they have picked out, 2011 and 2017. Both of those years saw weak La Nina conditions, and each of those years had fairly high ACE numbers overall, and that is comparable to what they are looking at for next year. They meaning the folks at TSR. Now we will get an update from them in April, and we will get our first look from Colorado State and Dr. Klotzbach and his colleagues also in the first part of April. So several months from now, those puzzle pieces that I just addressed with you will be what we watch, especially this. We want to see how the state of the INSO transitions and what happens with the Atlantic warmth. Will this re-energize itself and re-solidify as being very, very much above normal like we saw in 2023 and through much of this year? Or do we get a much stronger subtropical ridge sitting out here and the trades just start to really huff and cool some of this down, mixing it up more? We don't know. We don't know. Those are the puzzle piece segments that we just don't know how they're going to fall into place just yet. So that's why we talk about it. We gather around, I show you what I know, and we go from there. All right? Pretty simple. Lower 48 weather time, generally speaking, not a bad day considering it's the day before Christmas. So if you're traveling throughout the Northeast corridor, not bad at all. It could certainly be worse. A few winter weather advisories here and there, but again, nothing compared to, I mean, we know how bad it can get. The big hubs out of Miami, Atlanta, Charlotte, even up through, again, the I-95 airports, not too bad at all. And then out west, Denver, out to Phoenix, even LA, Vegas, wherever, Dallas, of course, in the Midwest. Not too bad considering we are in winter. Now look, if you are flying out to the Pac Northwest, that's a different story. We got a few storm systems coming in, even hurricane force wind warnings way out here in the offshore waters. But by and large, not a bad travel period compared to where it could be. And we can see that generally reflected in the upper level pattern. Look at all those colors. I hadn't shown you this. I don't even remember the last time we looked at it. But it's the lower 48. And this is your 500 millibar geopotential height and your mean sea level pressure way down at the surface. So there's a surface low, and then these are your different height fields. And in the atmosphere, ridging of high pressure, little troughs or short waves here, stuff like that. And what this shows me, just looking at it at a quick glance, generally zonal flow across the United States, meaning that the air is coming off the Pacific, for the most part, modified Pacific air. And the storm track, generally anemic right now, more confined to the Pacific Northwest with your more formidable storms, while the east, not so bad. And as we move out into time, leave 2024 behind, and get into early next year, the pattern, of course, changes a little bit. There's an upper level low that ejects out into the Rockies over the coming days. Might bring the Denver area a literal white Christmas. We'll see. And then, really not much change yet. This is this coming Friday, big travel day. People start heading home from the Christmas holidays. And a little bit of a sign, though, once we get towards the first of the year, once we get past one more zonal event, that finally we start to see, look at that big ridge down over Florida and the Caribbean. That's when I should have gone down to, well, it was not bad, actually, in Grand Cayman and Jamaica. But that looks like that's a 594 height line down there if I had to look at it. Yeah, there it is, 588 to 594. That just means a big, thick area of air. Sorry, I'm geeking out on it. When you see the red show up, that's a thick ridge. And when you see these colors, that's a pretty good upper level low that's trying to get pinched off in the desert southwest. But we're approaching 10 days out. But it's after the 10-day time frame that things really start to get interesting. Now remember, this is a deterministic model. This is not your ensemble. But the deterministic starting to show that longitudinal trough developing at the first of the year. This is 2 weeks out, but, and I say but, it is important to note that yes, even that far out, we can get some idea of trends. And that's what our friends at the CPC and the National Weather Service do. They work with each other, and looking at the time frame that I just showed you, way out in time there, weather speaking, the 4th to the 17th of January, you can just infer pretty deep troughing over the east, ridging out west, and this would also bring the chance for snow, storms, whatever. You get the cold air, the snow, the energy, that could all happen. And this is getting picked up on by other people. John and Eric Webb have seen it, and Tomer Berg. Those are the guys that I really go to look for this kind of stuff. There's a few others out there too, but they do a really good job. This is what John posted recently. He says, I'm becoming increasingly convinced that the upcoming pattern will be the most favorable we've seen for winter weather in the Northeast U.S. in at least a few years. No guarantees, he says, but this is a very impressive configuration, effective for both low-level cold and for all you weather geeks out there that love the snow and the ice and whatever, excitement, winter excitement, cold and storm chances. And the annotation that he has done to the ensemble graphic here from the GFS, if you know what you're looking at, it really does make sense. And other people are seeing it as well. Tomer was talking with him back and forth. We can look at it in the comments. See, Tomer, all of the ingredients are in place for once. whereas last year's negative NAO, and that's referring to the blocking and whatnot, those were still conditional. He says, it's very hard for me to think of a bus mode for this one, except, there's always an except, right? The poorly timed upstream short waves, which comes down to random chance. And those are little pieces of energy that would rotate around. We don't know. That's like looking for the hurricanes within a larger favorable overall weather pattern. We just don't know for sure. But it's interesting, too, speaking of deterministic models versus ensemble, you look at the deterministic today at 300 hour versus the deterministic GFS. Brian, saying back to John, so you believe that ensemble at 300 hours, but, the operational 12Z today was terrible. But John brings up a very good point. There's a major difference in value between multi-model ensemble agreement and a deterministic model run at 300 hours out. I saw quite a few people yesterday sharing that hang it on the wall run of the Euro, where it showed this huge winter storm for the I-95 corridor. But folks, that was 10 plus days out. It was January 5th that it was valid for. One snapshot of one deterministic model, as good as the Euro is, it's not going to nail a forecast at 10 plus days out. We all know that. But I like it that John is kind of reeling things back in, dialing it back, that look, we got to look at the ensembles. You look at multi-model ensembles as well. And it really is starting to talk to him and Tomer and Eric and others that recognize this pattern stuff. And even an hour ago here, John saying on the upcoming pattern change and why I believe it might be the best chance for cold and snow in New York City. Bingo. Big, obviously a lot of people care about the Big Apple and a big winter and the entire Northeast, he says there in parentheses, in several years. He's got a post on it on his Patreon, and it's great to see other people using Patreon. I think that's wonderful. Crowd-funded weather and science and everything else is terrific. So yeah, it looks like a potential exciting change if you like this kind of thing. If you don't, it might not be such good news for you as we come up into the new year. But for me, I look at it as a chance to get out in the field, potentially cover some stuff. I love winter weather, especially when it's wild and crazy. But look, we also got to pay attention to it too, because it affects travel. The cold can affect people that can't deal with the cold. It can cause loss of life if people are not careful. And there are impacts, just like there are with the hurricanes that we are mostly known for here at, well, it says it right there, HurricaneTrack. But I'm on top of this, just like most people are when they want to watch this kind of winter weather stuff unfold. And again, getting into the first part of next year could be a favorable pattern. We shall see. All right, before I let you go, one thing that Patreon has enabled this year, and I think it's great, you can give the gift of Patreon to a weather geek, somebody in your life that is into the weather and would enjoy getting out, what we do at Patreon and our crowd-funded project. They can take advantage of it. So give them a gift card, so to speak. It's virtual, of course, but there's a maybe a membership tier that you can gift. I have enabled, maybe it's just too cold here and I can't talk anymore. I've enabled the $4 level and the $10 level. I want to see how it goes. This is brand new. Patreon just enabled this, enabled it over the last few weeks. So you can give the gift of the $4 level, which gets you our Patreon access plus Discord. See our Discord server right here? There's our back end, our front end, all the different folks we've got. Yep, you get access to that and our regular Patreon, anything I post there. Or the $10 level, which is everything. All the live cams, all the good stuff that people have come to know us for over really the last 5 years, as much as it's grown. And you can give the gift of this. I'll put a link to, and it's right there, patreon.com/HurricaneTrack/gift, but I will put a link to it in today's update. And you can give that as a gift, a month, a year, whatever, you choose. And somebody will open that up on Christmas Day or whatever and be like, yeah, I got a Patreon gift to the HurricaneTrack Patreon. And listen, it is also valid for all the other folks, I do believe, on Patreon. So whomever you're following, you want to gift to somebody else's Patreon, a wonderful thing that they have enabled the creators to benefit from, because we rely on you to help support what we do, and we appreciate it. It gets me to where I am now. Seriously, we've done a lot. This year was my busiest in my entire career, in large part thanks to our support from our patrons on Patreon, and of course my relationship with Fox Weather. That has allowed me to do even more. Speaking of that, either the 31st or the 1st, we're still working on it, I'll be on Fox Weather a few times, recapping my most memorable moments. We'll be doing some live hits of 2024. And what a year it was. Wow. I was thinking about doing maybe a live thing on New Year's Eve myself for a couple of hours, just kind of going over some of the top stuff. I'll worry about that later, but I might do something fun on New Year's Eve sometime in the late afternoon or early evening to kind of reflect on all the cool stuff we did in 2024. And the last thing before I let you go, if you are a current patron of our Patreon, don't forget tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern, we're going to be having our own internal Zoom meeting with our patrons to reflect on the year, talk about some technical stuff that went very, very well. Very little went wrong this year. It was actually a very big year of growth, especially in the area of technology and success with that. And a very important couple of announcements for what I'm going to be doing for next year, moving the stuff forward, continuing what we have done and developing it further. Very excited about where we're going to go for 2025. Tonight, 7 p.m., I'll send the Zoom link out on Patreon and on our Discord about 5 or 10 minutes before we go live on Zoom, and everybody can participate and see how y'all's year went and see how people are doing now. All right? Have a good rest of your Monday afternoon. As always, thanks for giving me a part of your day. I hope you learned something. I am Mark Sudduth. Don't forget, like, subscribe, share. You know what they say. And that does help the channel grow, so I sincerely would appreciate that. Have a great rest of your Monday, like I said, and a great Christmas. I'll see you again probably sometime on New Year's Eve.